So let me review again the three interventions, the three dominant interventions that I have introduced into Sophie's life, that I practice with her and that her mother also practices with her in an ongoing way. The first, perhaps the most revolutionary of these interventions, is the applied touch, which is based on a meridian therapy that originated in Japan. It's called Jinshin, and because my program is the Tara approach, Tools for Awakening Resources and Awareness, I call the applied touch system Jinshin Tara, because I adapted what I learned from my teacher, Mary Eno Burmeister, specifically for these needs, and I have also adapted Jinshin for other needs. So the applied touch system basically involves learning a map of the body. So these are bioelectrical sites. So bioelectricity has been measured in the body. It is used in all meridian therapies, but it's not by its nature an Eastern concept. Bioelectricity is used, for instance, in any imaging technique. It is being definitely accessed as a diagnostic in Western medicine. So I'm using that same system, I'm just not using any technology. I'm just simply using a very gentle touch, and that touch, as I mentioned earlier, can be varied depending on how the individual responds. So the touch doesn't have to be a particular way. The touch merely needs to be in these sites, and the sites themselves are fields as opposed to points. So that's what differentiates this particular applied touch system from something like acupuncture. And it also is different from something like massage, which is an active stroking kind of intervention that has other benefits, but is not the approach for using this applied touch system. So these sites on the body are touched, and that contact begins to stimulate a shift in the bioelectrical current of those sites, and that communicates through the connective tissue up the spinal column and begins to reorganize habituated patterns within the nervous system. So I have introduced that touch into Sophie's life in an ongoing way, and her mother uses it in an ongoing way. We use it for very simple things. Her mom, Kathy, uses it for very simple things, as well as the bigger picture of reorganizing Sophie's nervous system in a global way. We also are reorganizing it when she's upset, when she can't sleep, when she has diarrhea. So a good example would be that when I met Sophie when she was a child, she was very prone to respiratory infections. And in fact, girls with Rett syndrome are prone to respiratory infections because of the constriction in their chest and their breathing difficulties. So when I first met Sophie, I think the very first time she was starting a respiratory infection, and shortly thereafter she got another respiratory infection. Well, after Sophie began receiving these applied touch treatments in an ongoing way, virtually daily, certainly weekly, she stopped having respiratory infections. She, in the time that I've known her, which is now almost 9 years, she is not having any respiratory infections. I think she's had one in that 8-year time. So that demonstrates a change in her immune system, a change in her adrenal strength. And we don't know for certain that it is the product of this applied touch intervention, but that is the only new intervention that has been introduced into her life in this period of time. So the applied touch is probably the most revolutionary of the interventions that I introduced into Sophie's life. The second is the cranial treatment, which really is included in virtually every session that I have with Sophie. The other component of intervention is limbic stimulation. So that is communicating with Sophie, developing a relationship with Sophie that gives her the experience that she is being seen and being related to as a whole person, rather than as someone who has something wrong with her, etc. I think there's no question about the fact that families are dealing more and more overtly with the difficulties of sensory integration problems, autism, learning difficulties, neurodiversity, and that resources for these families are needed, and that the families themselves, because they're so frequently under duress, are developing those resources themselves, and that whether or not there is actually a pandemic, the need is pandemic. And I am an advocate for meeting those needs in a way that is accessible, that is easy and inexpensive for parents to access, that is safe, and that is promoting human potential. And Sophie has shown me through her responses to treatment, through her incredible growth into a blooming and beautiful teenager on the brink of womanhood, that these interventions, in her case, are positive. They have a positive outcome. And I want to share that possibility. I don't want to be overly optimistic, as I've been criticized for being. I don't want to mislead anyone into false possibilities, but at the same time, I want to encourage the potential of the parent to be a successful therapeutic avenue for their child, because the parents know the child more than anyone else, and the parents have the opportunity to observe their child functionally, emotionally, spiritually, under a variety of circumstances. And I think that clinicians need to see parents, and of course this won't be true in every case, nothing is true in every case, but parents, clinicians need to consider that parents can actually be reliable resources for information and for therapeutic intervention for their children. And I think clinicians need to listen to them. So I am thrilled to do what Kathy, Sophie's mom, frequently refers to as sharing our Sophie, as a way to inspire parents, children, and youth to optimize their potential and go for it, and believe that neurodiversity is a gateway, that developmental windows of opportunity can open, and that we can, with our hands, with our humanity, open those developmental windows. I don't think there's any question that we're living in an increasingly complex and sensory inundating culture globally, and that there are damages, and those damages mostly have to do with stress from that kind of sensory overload. So we can complain about that, or we can also look at the antidotes. And interestingly, I think the antidote to that sensory overload is humanity, is deepening the simplicity of what it means to be human, the creativity of human experience, the power of love, the power of the love that parents have for their children, the power of love that we're capable of having for each other, deepening those accessible, inexpensive, completely free human tools that are given to us in the interest of moving humanity forward, to not be burdened by sensory overload, because we are increasing, expanding our capacity to be human in the face of it.